Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Marsha Casper Cook, and we're starting our show. Rachel Thompson is our guest, and we're going to change it up a little. I thought we'd be talking about marketing, but I think we're going to talk about something that's very important: surviving abuse and bullying. And Rachel's the person to do it. So I'm bringing Rachel in, and there we go.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Rachel.
Hi. Are you hearing me okay?
Okie doke. We're all connected here.
Yay.
Okay, I was talking about who you are and what you do, so maybe you can tell everybody yourself.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Marcia. We've been connected for a long time, and I'm very grateful for that. I have written 8 books total, three specifically about being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and how that affected me as a person, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, and just all the different things growing up I didn't understand that had to do with trauma responses. And so now that I'm in my 60s, I'm 61, I've become much more educated. But it took me till I was probably almost 50 to write that first book and share publicly that I had been sexually abused as a child by a neighbor dad.
See, because yesterday, I plan to do because you are a really successful marketer, and we will talk about that later. But I
Sure.
did when I talked to you this morning because I had seen the series Adolescence, and I
Right.
thought of you.
Yes.
And I've only seen 2 episodes, but then I said, well, nobody better than you then to talk about all of this because when you didn't see it yet, but basically it's kids sometimes don't understand what to do when they're young and they don't understand this is not the same type of thing. I don't think yet. We can't tell that yet. But
Yeah.
I just thought that there's so much bullying, there's so much
Mhm.
problems. And what I got out of seeing it, these are young kids and they're trying to learn, and then a horrible incident occurs and everybody goes like berserk.
Yeah.
And kids now they've had COVID, they've been exposed to so much more than we as kids had ever been exposed to. And I thought, well, let's just talk about that because you have 3 books about that.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
it's
this is
interesting.
not new to you.
No, 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 no. I mean, it's interesting in that I have 2 kids. One's 25, and she's in a grad program at UC Davis, and my son is 19. So a lot of we've seen, you know, he hasn't fortunately had to deal with anything like this, but a friend of his has. And to be clear, I haven't watched the show yet, but
No, right. I didn't even finish it, but I just thought this would be a good
yeah.
subject. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I did talk to a friend of mine who's a social worker in the UK, and she said it's on everybody's lips. Everybody's talking about it. And she's actually going to use a few snippets when she's doing training for like teachers to what to
Oh,
look out
okay.
for with
Because
kids. And
I knew when I started watching it, this was important. So,
yes,
and I think, well, if she's saying that, then guess it is,
yeah,
because I felt it while I was watching it. It
yeah,
was just there. And it's just like, oh my God,
yeah.
and I think parents, they don't know their children like they should because, they're working, they're busy, and kids hide a lot of things from their parents.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, excuse me, from my perspective, my parents, when this happened, my parents had a new baby, my younger sister. I was just turned 11. My older sister was going into high school. My parents both worked full time. So, it was just it was like a crime of opportunity more than anything. And to address the fact that kids don't say anything, he threatened me that if I said anything, he would harm
Oh,
my baby
mm,
sister.
mm.
And so I was terrified, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
So it took about, I would say, a year before he had abused other children. And those parents contacted the police, and then they questioned all the kids in the neighborhood. And that's how I came out with my story. I wasn't the first one to say anything because he had told me that I would be in trouble if I said anything, and I would go to jail. So of
Yeah.
course, I'm terrified.
Well, yeah,
Why
you're
would
young. I know
yeah,
you don't.
why
Yeah.
would I say anything, right?
Yeah.
And also I think, kids and even adults to a certain extent, we accept the authority of an authority figure
Yeah. Yeah.
without doing that kind of due diligence. It's like, oh, okay, well, this person is a principal or this person is, in a position of power. There's always that power differential that's between an adult and a child
Right. Right.
anyway. But, kids are so young and so impressionable. And it was hard. I think, I've had several conversations now with my folks now that, we're all older. But
Yeah.
at the time, I was already a pretty quiet child. If you left me in my room to read all day or to write little short stories, I would have been thrilled.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
it was,
ready. Yeah.
yeah. So the fact that I became even more withdrawn, they didn't really notice because I was already that kind of kid anyway.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. And right. And some kids make a complete turnaround. And some kids don't change at all if something is happening. And you don't know. They become, they're not they're just laughing and smiling and they don't you don't and you ask them, is anything wrong? Sometimes they'll say no, and there is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, I think, a lot of times like I didn't have the language for what was happening to me. Kids now are much more
Right.
sophisticated,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's true.
But I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't even know how to refer to some of the things that happened, and I'm not going to go into detail.
Right. Right.
But like I didn't have that vocabulary. But you have to remember, when I was 11, that was 50 years ago. We didn't
Yeah.
have
Right.
cell
Right.
phones,
No.
like we
Yeah.
didn't have computers even to the extent that we have now. The thought of
And right, and
right,
part of this whole thing in adolescence. I mean, they're texting. There's text. There's
yeah,
pictures, and there's cameras that people that on the street where
yep,
something happened. And I even was saying to my husband, I said, "Look at the pictures," and it says, "Yeah, it's probably because it was, they have those surround cameras, everything. So you don't know wherever you are
right,
at all.
yeah,
If you're being seen, you have no
right,
idea.
yeah,
And kids, they're on their phone and they're giving messages, and it matters because anything you do online, somebody sees it.
right, right.
And that's what makes a difference now. That's what, it can really be bad.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the kids will use the disappearing messages apps like Snap or
Yeah,
Signal or Telegram as a way to not have things be tracked. But ultimately, if there's a crime involved, they'll be
right.
able to pull deleted messages.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
See,
So,
because,
when
but can't they tell though? I mean, because whenever you're watching TV, they seem to find everything,
I know,
even deleted messages.
they can delete.
Right. So this is a problem. So
Yeah.
if someone says, "Oh, I didn't say that," and you go, "Well, wait a minute. We
Yeah.
have a text or we have an email," and you think you're deleting it, but you're
Mhm.
somewhere. It's somewhere. It's out there.
Yeah, if and that's the thing we have to think about really as writers or people utilizing social media
Right.
is everything you say is going to be searchable even if you delete it. It's
Right.
already been indexed by Google.
Right.
So it's going to exist, for freaking ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Until they think of other ways to do things.
Yeah.
But I think, and I just think, children, they're not, teenagers are still children, even though we all thought we were mature.
Sure. Sure.
I was married really young. I thought, oh, I'm so mature. I was like
Yeah.
19 when I got, engaged and married. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, people don't do that anymore because you don't know
No.
what, you really are. I mean, naturally, I was working and everything. I was in lab school. I was doing everything that a 19-year-old could do, but I
Sure.
didn't know what marriage, I said, oh, yeah, I can get married, and now they think about things a lot more. But that, on the other hand, they think so much about everything that sometimes it's really hard for them to differentiate what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and how much money are they going to make. We all, that's what they think about now. What kind of job they're going to get, who
Mhm.
are their friends going to be? Am I going
Yeah.
to be considered a loner? Am I going to do this? I mean, that's what happens to people.
Yeah.
so much between those ages because you think, oh, I'm out of high school, but a lot happens in college, a lot.
Yeah, well, they say now the scientific studies and psychology and everything says that the brain isn't fully developed till 25.
Oh,
So
really?
the
Oh,
message has
interesting.
gone out. At least my kids have been
Yeah,
pretty good about saying, if I'm going to try anything, I'm going to wait till I'm 25 because I don't want to lose. You start
right.
losing brain cells, when you do
Yeah.
stupid stuff like
Well,
drugs, whatever. So
right. Yeah.
fortunately, like my daughter has absolutely no interest in any kind of alcohol or drugs, and she's
Yeah.
25. She's
Yeah.
just doesn't like the taste of alcohol.
Yeah.
Um, my son, he's got his own other issues to deal with, so he's not doing any kind of meds other than
Yeah.
what's prescribed. But a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of kids, I mean, I like to have a drink at the end of the day. I don't
Mhm.
mind, for me, but I'm an adult. I'm allowed to
Yeah.
do that, right?
I don't
So
drink at all because I don't like it at all.
yes,
And I think in high
exactly.
school I drank a little, and
Yeah,
sometimes my friends say, "What are you talking? You tell people you drank a little." I mean, you were in high school; you didn't hardly do anything.
I
But I
know.
think in
I
my
know.
mind, but I don't drink now at all.
Yeah.
But it's like, when I say it, they go like, "What are you talking about?" Because I was married before a lot of them, and I
Mhm.
had a life already. I was, working in a life, and
Yeah,
they were still in school. But they go,
right.
you're talking about like that, like you really drank a lot. You drank a few times. It's
Yeah.
not like, so I don't like to drink, but I do think people have to, I think when they're watching a lot of these, I do a lot of shows about television shows and things like that. And you watch people on TV and you watch kids, and even in the news, you see these kids, they
Yeah,
go on trips, they're
right.
drunk, they have no idea what's happening to them.
Yeah, it's really
And
scary.
that is scary,
Yeah.
if because you don't know if someone's going to put something in your drink or what's going to happen.
Mhm.
If you leave your drink down for a second, somebody could put
Yep,
something in it.
yep.
So I mean, they have all of these things. Plus, they've lost a lot of communication because of COVID. Some people don't
Right.
care what they do anymore if they
Yeah,
even go out, which is not good.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, that definitely changed a lot of things for a lot
yeah.
of people. Yeah, no.
I say that a lot because on my show, I'll never forget. I mean, it was COVID, and I had a show planned, and I went like, "Oh, should I do it or not?" And then
Yeah,
I did all the show, a lot of them after that. I did my regular shows and even more because people were home. And
right.
so at first I went like, well, maybe I shouldn't even do a show. And I'm going like, well, why not? They're home. We could talk, and we talked a lot about COVID and what the kids were going through. And I had a lot of parents on talking about how devastating it was for everybody of every age, older, younger. I mean, it was a bad time. So we have that to contend with right now.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, it's over." But so, how do you feel about that for people? You think about these things a lot. You talk about these things, I'm sure. So, I'd like to hear what your opinion is of what parents can do, possibly, to get their child to feel a little better now, because some of them are isolated still.
Yeah. I think it really depends on the kid. But my best advice, just being a parent myself and being a parent who experienced trauma,
Yeah,
is to have those open conversations. Like I've always told my kids, if there's anything about sex you want to ask me, or
yeah,
or
yeah.
alcohol or drugs or
Right,
cigarettes or
right.
vaping, let's have those conversations. There's nothing you can bring to me where I'm going to be like horrified. I'd rather have those conversations. And honestly, if they want to try drugs or alcohol, or yeah, I'd rather they do it at home where
Yeah,
they're not going to get in a car with a friend who's like,
right.
I'm fine, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think just being that kind of open, honest parent, and trying to listen without judgment can be really hard.
Yeah,
But I think it's important now, like you were saying, you got married at, 19.
yep,
My
yep,
mom got married at 18.
yep, yep,
And God love them. My parents are still alive and
yep,
fairly healthy,
yep.
living in their own home. They're in their 80s, but
Wow.
they've been together like 65 years, and they
Yep.
have, it was really cute. I was at my I went over to visit my folks yesterday. I brought them some food, and we were talking about what we do to go to sleep. And so my mom said, I often will just count backwards from 100, and I rarely get past 50, and I'm out. And my dad says, I just count grandchildren.
Was very pleasant then, at least, right?
Yeah. But I think having those conversations is really important. And I think for all of us, I mean, I'm not old enough to have lived through, for example, the polio scare, but my
Oh, yeah.
parents certainly were. And so when COVID came, this was very scary for them. And to this day, it's hard to get for my dad to wrap his mind around the fact that if he does get COVID, which he never did, it won't kill
Luckily,
him,
knock wood, right? Yeah,
right? But it could have. And
yeah.
so I think there's some PTSD,
Oh God, yes,
post-traumatic
I
stress
agree.
disorder, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
for kind of the whole planet.
yeah,
But
kind of,
for
yeah,
everyone who had to deal with this fear, I mean, all of us were like, if I touch a doorknob, am I going to get COVID? If I get COVID, am I going to
yeah,
die? Can I even get into the hospital? So I think it was something that we all had to sort of learn from and go
yeah,
through. But, I think, like, to go back to your question, just keeping that open communication with your
yeah,
kids is super important. And also, you know, I'm not afraid of technology. People are very terrified of it. I think
yeah,
we need to have those conversations so that
yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah.
how to interact in a way that makes sense to the kids too. So I always tell people, don't be afraid of AI. Don't be afraid of various apps.
Right.
I think it's more important that we have, well, knowledge is power, right? I mean, better to
Right.
know than,
I think that's true because look, things change as we're speaking. It's changing, and
yeah,
people, and everybody's worried about this or being hacked on Facebook. And I'm thinking like, if this is not. They're not. What are they hacking people in Facebook? I don't even know if they are. They go like because if you have a page and you invite someone, they go, oh, you're hacking. And well, what does that mean? I mean, they're not. It's
no.
just. It's not really hacking. It's nothing. So I wanted to dump all my pages and start again. But
Ah,
then I started to because I got tired of I have so many pages and Facebook I couldn't get it all together because when I started 16 years ago things were different and every Facebook page is completely different and every year they change things. So
right,
none of it was matching. So I
right.
wanted to just start everything again. So then if I started to invite a couple of people, they go like, they emailed me, are you hacking me? You're being hacked. I'm going like, oh, forget this. This cannot work. I mean,
Oh, it was probably
yeah,
because they thought that it wasn't you. That was
yes.
probably
And
why.
that's the problem. So I know some people that came out and they go like, this is me. I was on your show. Remember? Going, yes, I know you, and it's like because we're so used to thinking that something harmful. We cannot live like that forever.
No, no, but I think it's important also that we have our guard up. I'm
Yeah.
writing a post right now for my Substack on common scams that are
Yeah.
happening for authors. I mean, and
I know.
honestly,
Maybe you should talk. Let's talk about that because
yeah,
because I've had I think my books are somewhat there. I always knew they were going to be pirated out because
sure,
why? How not?
right,
Because it's easy to do.
yeah,
You can copy anything, and
yeah,
so my book may be under another name, another cover, everything, and so I think that's a problem. I can't worry about that because this is life. I mean, I can't
right,
do that to myself
right,
because anything we do could be anywhere, but that's a
yeah,
problem. So
yeah,
maybe you want to talk because you know what's out there. That's what they're saying. And then people say, "Do you want to be in the lawsuit against this one?" I'm going like, "Oh, I
hmm,
don't want all of this." So
I
talk
know.
about what's going on. Talk about what you think.
Yeah, well, the big thing that broke over the last week was that The Atlantic shared an article where they were focusing on a database called lib for
Yeah,
library,
right,
lib
right.
generative.
Yes,
And it's a free article. Anyone can go type in your book titles, type
I
in an
did.
author. Several of my books are in there. I was
Me
never,
too.
yeah,
Me
I was
too. Yeah,
never approached and said, can we use this to train
right,
our AI?
right.
And so there are ways that people can take a look at that. Just go to the Atlantic and look up LibGen, or
Yeah.
just search it, AI.
Yeah, I did, and I saw two books of
Yep.
mine.
Yep. And so Writers Guild has written a response. So I would suggest people go to Writers Guild and see what can be done. I expect a lot of lawsuits are
Yeah.
going to be happening
Mhm.
because, they're considering it a piracy issue, because
Yeah.
even though our books are not available through the AI, our works can be pulled as examples. Like, for example,
Mhm.
if somebody wrote in on Chat GPT, how do you write about trauma? Potentially my books could come up, and the content of my books could come up and
Yeah.
then anybody could just copy and paste it and off they go. The other sort of way to look at this is, maybe it's not a horribly bad thing. One of my clients said, listen, if people want to look in, he writes about extreme overvalued beliefs. He's a neuropsych.
Oh,
And the reason that, like, mass casualty events happen, he writes about very serious stuff. And he said, if somebody
wow.
goes into any of the AIs, but let's specifically be talking here about Chat GPT, his books will come up and then they can click on it and purchase it. So he said,
Oh,
maybe
well,
it's
yeah,
another
yeah,
avenue
yeah, yeah,
that we
yeah.
haven't considered. So I'm reserving judgment. I do like using AI for what I consider ethical things, like, take this headline title and make it more SEO
Yeah,
optimized,
I like that. Right, I
right?
do. I do too.
Right. Or,
Mhm.
some examples with proof sources of the best way to find book awards or something. And I'll use it that way, but I never take what it's given me and then
Me?
copy and paste it
No, I don't
verbatim,
either. Right, right.
right? Because it doesn't have my voice.
Exactly. That's exactly what I do because if I see something, I'll go like, "Oh, tell me about such and such," and for a description. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, "Well, how do they know that's what?" And I tell them a few lines, and I
Yeah.
go, "How did they possibly know that that was what I was thinking?" They just
Hmm.
put it in a better way, and I rework it, or
Yes.
just take maybe a sentence from it. That's
Yeah.
it.
And I think that's, for me, I consider that perfectly ethical. Is it
Yeah.
writing my books for me? Absolutely not.
No.
I didn't
No.
even have AI available when I
Yeah.
published my 8 books, but
Oh, yeah. We didn't know
yeah,
about that then.
no. But you can also, I'm on a weekly podcast with Madeline Sklar, who
Uh-huh.
is on StreamYard. So we mentioned that.
Yeah.
And she talks about ways to use AI that it can
Yeah.
be an ethical discussion. But some people are just like, absolutely no, no. But let's go back to scams really quick.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll share this in my Substack. I can send you the link,
Yeah,
Marsha.
I'm on Substack too, and Substack, and I want to start writing a blog about things, but I just didn't do it yet.
That's all right.
So
It'll
I
still
think
be
it's a
there.
good thing for people because people are just saying what they really think
Yeah.
on Substack, and
Uh-huh.
I, it's not horrible things; it's just their opinions, or maybe it could help people. So I think that's a good thing to be on for people.
I like Substack
Yeah.
because the thing about the difference between a newsletter, from a marketing perspective, the difference between a newsletter that only goes to email and Substack is that it only goes to email, but it also exists online, which Google then indexes.
Yeah.
So from an SEO perspective, I do feel that Substack is a great option for anybody.
Okay.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be writers. And then they also have what's called Substack Notes, which is basically social media.
Yeah.
It's very text based.
Yeah.
So I really like that. And notes are actually also indexed by Google. So from a marketing perspective, it's not going to hurt you,
Right.
I don't feel, to be on Substack.
No, I don't either. Yeah.
Yeah, but just a couple of scams. I just want to go
Okay.
through these really quickly. So one, I'll actually read it to you, and I have screenshots of it in my Substack. So
Okay.
this is one that goes to, I manage like 50, 70 accounts right now. So I see this across the board. This was
Wow.
on my personal Bad Redhead Media
Yeah.
page. Hello, I hope all is okay with you. It would be pleasure to read, evaluate, and discuss books. So obviously,
Mhm.
we know that this is not written by somebody who
Right.
is probably a native English speaker. No offense to
Right.
anybody who is not
Right.
a native English speaker. It's
Mhm.
just a sign for me that this is probably not legit.
Right.
And it says, I will post my review of your book on all the platforms below, including Goodreads, Amazon, Instagram, and Google, for more reach and hence more sales. Please send me a copy of your book. The charge is
Mhm.
only $50.
Uh-huh.
That's a no, because you will
That's
never
a
see
no.
that
That's
person again,
right.
and
Mhm.
they will have your
No.
$50. And let's just say that's how they make their money. If they get 10 people a day to pay them $50,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
$500 day. It's super
Right.
easy to make money off of
Oh
people.
yeah.
So
Very.
that's
Very.
that's one of the ones. And then
Yeah.
another one that keeps coming through, this is meta specific. It says, we have scheduled the deletion of your page. So of
Oh my
course you're
God.
like,
Oh,
oh
I know.
my God, right?
I know. The first time I got it, I went,
Yeah.
oh
We
God.
have reviewed your page and
Yep.
identified content that may violate Facebook's policy on violent content. You have to remember that could
Ah,
no way be true because I'm writing about book marketing, but
right.
whatever.
And
Um,
it says though, it says it's from Meta though. It's Meta
yeah, it
Business. It
does.
comes
It
in. It
does.
does.
Yep. And it says, if you believe this is done in error, you have 7 days to address this,
Uh,
or we will, uh, and then they give you some random URL. Don't ever
I
click
know.
on those.
I know. I know.
Yeah. It is never legit. So I'm
I,
sharing this in my Substack. I know
that's
I'm not
good.
the only people that get these,
But that's
obviously.
good that you're sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important just as authors, especially if you're self published and you don't have kind of the might of a publisher behind you,
What
that,
about PayPal? I get PayPal ones every time. This one
oh,
has been 400, 399.99.
yep,
They
yep,
are charging. So the
yep,
first couple times I called PayPal, I have a few PayPal accounts. So I called them and they go, no. And I said,
yeah,
check my other ones, and they check it. And I just now I never click anything. I just delete them. And
good.
I get them every day
Yep.
from some, and I'm trying, I go on and unsubscribe to a lot of things. It's
Yeah.
really difficult, but anything you get that's suspicious, you're right, you have to check. And I know people don't want to call or do it. You got to call. And
Yeah.
because if it is at the first few, if it's a big sum of money, go into your bank accounts, go into your PayPal, look and see if it's taken out. Usually it's not,
No. But if
but
you click
don't
on
click. Yes,
these
do not
links,
click.
yeah, like verify this here. Don't ever click on that. The other
Right,
thing you can do is you can go into Facebook or PayPal and you can check. There's ways to see if they have sent you email. And if they have not sent you email or a
right. Yeah.
notification, then confirm it's not from
I
them.
know. It is
Yeah.
hard out there now. Very.
It is. It
It is.
is.
While we're talking about this, okay, this will go into just the marketing part for a second.
Sure.
Uh, Facebook, Twitter, all of this, Pinterest. I'm on everything. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but it's so difficult for people to sell books now. It's almost impossible because
Yeah.
you're in there's billion people that have books. I mean, God, I don't even know how many books Amazon has. Uh,
Millions,
right,
millions.
billions, probably billions by now because
Probably.
everybody's writing. Yeah, and it's very difficult to figure out what they should do with their book because most of this does not work. What are you telling your clients?
Well, number one, I don't guarantee book sales because
Right,
I'm
exactly.
right. I mean, I say think of the spokes of a bicycle. I'm one spoke, right?
Right.
So book marketing, social media, advertising, that all goes under the umbrella of book marketing. But you also have PR potentially. You may or may not have an agent and a publisher.
Yeah.
Um, there's tons of wonderful promotional newsletters out there,
Yeah.
especially like if you can get a featured deal on BookBub, then you
Yeah.
kind of got it made. But those are almost impossible to get now unless you
Yeah.
are a traditionally published author.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Although I see now much more than ever, lots of people coming in on, Blue Sky, on Threads. There
mhm.
are people that want to read people's books,
Yes.
which is almost impossible to get people to read them. And
Yeah.
people go like, "Oh, you don't want to pay for this." Sometimes you do have to pay for things now. I listen. Years ago, my advice, I was an agent, literary from the guild, and I'd say, don't pay for anything. But almost now you might have to pay for because you're not going to get reviews. And that's the bad thing about this now for people. They can't get reviews.
So this is what I just read, that approximately 11,000 books are published every day,
Hmm.
including self-published and traditionally published
Right,
title.
right,
Yeah, so that is over, it equates to approximately 4 million new book titles each year.
right.
That's a lot.
That's
So
a lot. That's a lot.
what I have found, the way that I work, and when clients hire me, is I'm all about building relationships. So
Yeah,
I really focus on that relationship building. And that's really what social media is great for, is connecting with readers, connecting with people who have, similar life experiences. And that's how people find you, is through that word of mouth, right? So we
yeah,
have
right.
digital word of mouth. So what I suggest to people really, or if I'm handling their campaigns, is to focus on where is your ideal reader going to hang out. So, for example, I'm working with a wonderful woman now. She's in her 70s. She's written her first memoir about
Oh,
the difficulties of with her mother and kind of the background behind that.
yeah,
So I already know the majority of her female reading older, memoir is going to be on Facebook. There's no question. Facebook is going
right,
to be like
yeah,
the most important place for her.
right.
Whereas I'm also working with a gal who wrote a travel memoir, and she's 24 years old. She went
Ah,
for a year and wrote a whole memoir about it. So she's much more active
yeah,
on Instagram, and she doesn't like TikTok, which is a little surprising because that group loves TikTok.
yeah,
So I think if you can look at it strategically, where is your demographic going to be? Then that's where you want to spend the majority of your time. However, I also feel it's important to look at what is indexed by Google. Because if you're spending, let's say you put 10 posts a day out on, excuse me, Blue Sky, excuse me, and it's not indexed, that's not helping your overall visibility online, so that
yeah,
people could put in, think about, like, what do you look for? If you go into Google and you type books about trauma, I would want my books to come up, right?
right,
So if I'm not sharing my books, or even just trauma related topics that, other people have written, or trauma related books, then I'm diluting my brand. And my brand is, for specifically for being a survivor,
right,
is, trauma coaching, mental health awareness. For being a writer who works with authors, I have very different branding
yeah,
for Bad Redhead Media. So I'm not sharing things about being a survivor, for example, over on Bad Redhead Media,
yeah,
whereas I'm sharing more about, these types of things we're talking about,
right,
scams, and,
right.
all the other things that go into being an author. So I think anybody who is expecting guaranteed book sales based on followers is going to be very disappointed.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's even hard now. It's hard to get followers. Years ago, when you were on Facebook and you put something out, lots of people would look at it and comment or just like. They don't
Yeah.
do that now. They just
Yeah.
scroll. They're not going to touch it. So don't think your work isn't being seen, because it is, but they're
Well, and
just not doing anything.
the other thing that I tell people to look at is, look at your analytics. You get what's
Right.
called
Yes.
insights, right, on
Yes. Yeah.
Facebook and
Yes.
Instagram and other places. And so I would rather know, what is the reach? What is the engagement?
Right. Yeah.
What are the number of views, as opposed to how many followers somebody has? And
Right.
agents and publishers have gotten very smart, and so they are asking those questions. We don't care if you have 100,000 followers on
Right.
Twitter. We want to know what your reach, engagement, and views are.
Right.
So, maybe you don't get a lot of interaction, but you may be getting the views as opposed to the comments. And so comments aren't really the best measure of the success of a post. It's really, or even likes, it's really more what like I said, interaction, engagement rate, views.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I look at.
Yeah, well, I was telling people the other day, a lot of people think, oh, I don't need a website. I go, yes, you need a website.
Yes.
I believe it, you need it. But they go, no, I don't. But you do, because a website, you don't, I mean, sometimes people don't want to look at them, but I really like a website because you see what the person, everything about them, not just one
Mhm.
post,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
I like for my guests, I want to know all about them
Yeah.
and what they did and what they could talk about. And like with you, I know you already for years, and I've seen you, in many places all over, and I've read your articles, and we've talked. So I know what you do. So that's why immediately when
Yeah.
I saw that yesterday, it was weird because you were coming on. When I started to watch Adolescents, I went like, "Oh my God!" I didn't real. This is good to talk about because I know you can talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's my branding and that I'm
Yes.
able to, and I have spoken on these things. So it's
Yeah.
it's like a measure of, I don't know if it's a measure of expertise. I mean, nobody wants to be an expert
No, and
living
nobody.
through
Right,
trauma.
right, right,
Yeah. Um,
right.
but you do associate that with me. So I get a lot of questions from people
Yeah,
about shows, about someone in the
right,
news, another Me Too or whatever.
right.
I don't have the answers for everybody, but I can only share some of what I've learned and how I'm able to, understand a lot of what these, and I have to be in a certain frame of mind too, because sometimes
Yeah,
people don't realize that they're trauma dumping.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so they may just come at you with their story because they really just want somebody to hear them
Yeah.
who can relate, even if the abuse was different. It was still, they were children, it was still sexual abuse.
Right.
So they find an ally in me that they may not have in real life, and it's a little bit safer too because they don't really know me, but
Right.
they know that maybe I've written books about it, so I'm considered safe. And
No, I
so
think
those are the
that's
things that we
why.
have to
Right.
work.
Years ago, I used to go walk around the track in a health club, and the
Yeah.
women, I would talk to different men, women, whatever, and they would
Yeah,
talk, and it was really fine because they could talk about their problems. I didn't know anything about them or
sure.
whatever,
Yeah.
and eventually we became friends. But one day I was watching, was walking with this girl that we walked for like 2 years, and then she mentions the name, and I go, "Oh, my friend was married to that person." And she goes, "Well, I'm married. I was married too." I went like, "What? What are the chances?"
Whoa.
Right. I didn't know her last name,
Ah,
and when I mentioned it, so it was so weird, because you don't know sometimes. And when you're just meeting people, like at a beauty salon, at a restaurant, wherever you're talking, you have no idea.
uh-uh.
And so sometimes it's easier for people to just say, "Oh, this happened or that happened," then they don't know you.
Right, right. And it's interesting because anytime I walk into a restaurant, an airport, a classroom, it's always in my brain, one of three girls and one in six boys will be abused before the age of
Yeah,
18. And
that's
90% of the time they know their abuser. As in my
yeah,
case, it was a
yeah,
neighbor dad. And so that is how my brain has been trained, because I feel like sometimes we meet people and we have a great rapport or kind of an off rapport, and so I feel like it's helpful to trust our own instincts. And I pretty much, one of my daughters met a gal who was on her same online school program. We met them at like a social thing. She was like, I don't know, 16, 17 years old maybe at that time. And I said to my daughter, this girl is damaged. I know it. I
yeah,
see it. And, I hope she gets the help that she needs. And of course, then things blew up and it became kind of crazy on her part, not my daughter's. But I think, you know, I, I really have a problem when people say hurt people, because that's not always the case. So
yeah,
this is where I'm bringing this back around to.
yeah.
I was hurt, but that doesn't mean that I am going to do that to somebody else. There's
Oh,
not
right.
that automatic assumption that hurt people hurt people.
No, yeah,
It isn't true all the time.
right,
I think it's very nuanced instead of it being sort of a generic sort of cliche thing that people say. And so I really, I try to interact with people in a way that I'm understanding where maybe their pain is coming from, and
right.
just having compassion, having compassion for anybody, regardless of how they come at you, I think is a really helpful life skill.
Urgent. That's urgent compassion.
Yeah.
That's, and this is one of the things that, sometimes I see people on Facebook and I see something that they wrote and I'm going like, oh, you need to not have this on him. So I
Yeah.
message them privately and I go, do you think this should be, because it's really not good. Some stuff you do not have to tell people.
Right.
You have to talk to somebody or but you do not tell people. I'm not one. I listen. I think I got one of the traits from my grandmother, where she says, don't wear any your sadness or anything on your sleeve. Just
Mhm.
you don't have to tell everybody everything,
Yeah.
because and because some people don't care and they're just but it's nice if you're, like, let's say, walking with someone and they're interested in listening to your story. That's how I wrote my book, To Life, about the Holocaust survivor. We walked at a health club and she
Wow.
started telling me her story and I went like, oh my God, this is a long time ago. She's gone now, and the book I've written years ago, but
Yeah.
that's how I met her. She was
Yeah.
just telling me her story, and I was just fascinated listening. And then when I did her book, I was so distraught because, being Jewish, I had no idea what she went through. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing. But she was talking about it, and I always saw her that way because that she was a survivor.
Yeah.
I changed the name of the book
Mhm.
because at first it was more than a survivor, because she was a model, she had a family. But when I
Mhm.
saw survivor, I thought people would say maybe she's a breast cancer survivor. So then we changed it to life,
Yeah.
because survivor means a lot of different things.
Mhm. It does. It's in fact, it's kind of, I mean, just something funny that you deal with in social media. If you put in the hashtag survivor
Mhm.
on Twitter, now X, the show Survivor will come up. That's
Oh
what
yeah,
most
okay.
people are writing about, right?
That's the other thing. That's what happens though. When
Yeah.
you put a tag word,
Yeah.
sometimes I think people should look at where the tag word goes.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize hashtags. You don't just grab hashtags and say, "Oh, well, I'm gonna put this on my post," because,
Right.
you know yeah,
Yeah.
but people do that, and there's really no way to monitor that.
Right.
There's no hashtag police, you
Yeah.
know?
I do think one thing that's good now, the doctors do. They ask questions on a form,
Yes.
and then they ask you while you're in the office.
Yes.
They go, is there something you want to talk about? Are you, is somebody abusing you? Are you afraid of anything?
Yes.
And that's really good.
Yeah, that's really important. Sorry,
And
I'm
they ask you it at the office and the form you fill out before that.
yeah.
So I think that's really, because people will don't want to, either they won't put it on, they're afraid somebody will see that form. But when they get in the office and someone says, is there something special you want to talk about? Are you being hurt? I think
Mhm.
that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really important. And that's
Yeah.
honestly, that's one thing that I advocate for survivors is when you go in to have doctor's appointments, tell them that you are a survivor of
Yeah.
sexual abuse.
Right.
It's very, very important, especially for women and gynecology type
Yes.
stuff, because that can be a trigger for a lot of people. Or what in trauma
Yeah.
coaching we call it an activation. So your nervous system becomes
Yeah.
activated based on your brain flashing back to a time when you were not safe, and that can become again very
Yeah.
activating. So that's one of the things that I tell people: tell everybody that you are a survivor,
Right.
because they will take more. If they're a good doctor or healthcare provider, they will take
Right.
more time with you. They will walk you through every step. They will
Yeah.
say, is this okay, or I'm going to touch you here. And a lot of
Especially gynecologists,
yes,
especially.
yes, and a lot of times we, especially women, don't do
Mhm.
that. We go
No,
in,
I know.
we just suffer through it, and then we
Yeah.
leave. And
Yeah.
I've had a situation where I completely dissociated during a vaginal ultrasound, and it took me about 10 minutes to just sort of come out of it. I just went to
Really?
some other
Wow.
place because it
Yeah.
was just, and I've never had that since or before that. So you
Yeah.
never know what might activate somebody
Yeah.
or trigger them or bother them. And I don't think it's ever really intentional. But if you're not getting the care that you feel you should have as a survivor who has, maybe needs above and beyond
Yeah.
what a quote unquote normal patient might have, you have to advocate for yourself. And it's okay. I think, I used to be a pharma rep,
Oh,
um, and I called on docs for 17
yeah.
years.
Right.
And I can tell you, they'd rather have too much information than not enough.
Right. Right. I
So,
worked for doctors for years, but see
yeah,
the
you did.
problem
That's
now,
right.
right,
Yeah.
for now, but years, and I worked in hospitals, but the problem is they don't have time now. So
No,
you have to bring it up or they might not have time. But
exactly.
you because it's different now. I mean, I don't love the way it is now because it's just sometimes you feel like non-existent, but I'm all right. But if somebody has a problem, this is a place to tell your
Yes,
problem to. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
but and they're rushing you a lot of times. Yeah,
Hmm.
but I think you can always change your doctor. I've done that.
Oh, me too.
I like a good bedside manner. I know people don't care, but I like a doctor that is nice, compassionate, and I'm not afraid to go to a male. A lot of women now just want women, but
Hmm.
I'm fine with the man. But
Hmm.
I think that a lot of doctors are very compassionate, and women sometimes they're not as compassionate as you think
Yeah.
because it was so hard, like even years back for women. Now there's tons of women doctors, but I
Right.
do remember when there weren't, and I remember when there weren't women reps either that went to from pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
were, and then when there were women, doctors as they are, the women people they got in fast to see the doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the truth. So, I mean, everything changes, but people should try to find a doctor they like or somebody that they can talk to. Don't
Yes.
hold it in.
No.
Holding it in is never good.
Right. And if it's not a good fit, you have every right to just call up your insurance company and say, not a good fit. This is
Oh,
who I'd
that's
like.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Can you do that oh,
Yep.
that's good.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
changed my internist. I When I moved here to this area of Northern California, I had to get all new doctors, and I went
Yeah.
in to see an internist because I have migraines, so I have stuff
Yeah.
to manage, and I had to get a referral to a neurologist, and she was awful. I mean, just mean,
Yeah.
grumpy,
I,
older woman. At the time, I would have guessed she was in her 70s back then.
yeah.
Um, and so I called my insurance company. I said, I'd like someone in the same practice, but I prefer somebody who's younger and nicer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have a wonderful internist I've had for 10 years now. She's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't done that, I think I would have probably avoided going, which is
Yeah.
what a lot of people do. I have
They
so
do.
many survivor friends who
Yeah.
haven't been to the dentist in years, haven't been to the gynecologist, have
Wow.
never gotten
Wow.
a mammogram. And they're, and that's
Ay, they
another,
need that. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
They
another
need it.
form of abuse is medical abuse. So you have a
Yeah.
difficult, some people just can't.
I
And
know.
that's really, it's
It's
just,
sad. Yeah.
it is
That's
very
bad.
sad. Yeah.
I didn't realize I wasn't thinking about that, but that's true. They need to have these things. It's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah.
And the way the medical system has been going, it's just such a fast interview. And they
Right.
ask instead of asking you the questions, they send you a form.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'd like to know if a lot of these doctors even read the forms because having worked for doctors, I happen to have good doctors I was worked for, but they're
Yeah.
rushed sometimes and they don't always see everything.
No, no. And they do depend on their nurse practitioners or their
Yes.
PAs or their
Yeah.
staff to highlight, give
Yeah.
me the summary in 30 seconds.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good way to look at it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's true. Because sometimes they say, why are you here?
Yeah,
And sometimes you don't want to say, really, you might be afraid.
exactly.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, there's all kind of things like I'm interested that that you brought this up. But I think it's a good idea to talk about because I think these are things that people don't talk about. And men, it's even worse because men, they say nothing.
Right.
They
Right.
don't want to.
And I think and sometimes if you are not in the position to be vocal, because maybe like this one friend of mine, she gives blood every 3 months and
Uh-huh.
she dissociates every time. So
Yeah.
she lets them know that when you lean me back, I will probably be non communicative. And she takes one of her family members with her, and they know that now and they don't have a problem with it, and it's fine. But because she is verbal about it, um, before she might not be able to be verbal about it, then they know what they're dealing with. But sometimes I think if you can just bring somebody, a friend or a family member
Yeah.
who can be that verbal person
Yeah.
for you, because sometimes we don't know what's going to activate us. And that's the
Well,
thing about being a survivor, is it can come from anywhere.
Well, there are some people that are scared to death of going to a doctor, and
Yeah.
they're scared to get their blood drawn. And as a tech, I if I knew that or sensed it, I would have them lay down because you really
Yeah.
can't pass out when you're laying down. You
Right.
could pass out, and when you get like a teenage guy, that's yeah, because I have pediatricians, maybe somebody 16, they
Sure.
fall to the floor as a dead weight. You can't even get them. They're
No.
tall, and so we would go, oh, smelling salts, smelling salts, because they do, and it's so much easier if they just say something. And
Yeah.
in adolescence, he's scared of blood tests at the beginning. They mentioned this,
Hmm.
but I always women too, if they were feeling kind of queasy, just all the things that people take for granted that I can do this and I can do this and I can have a mammogram, but for not everybody, they can't. They like work themselves up so badly that by the
Hmm.
time they get there, they're like out of it.
And that was the sad part, just to go back to COVID really quick, was, when people
Oh,
were hospitalized, they couldn't have anybody with them. There was
oh,
no visiting. I had to have emergency gallbladder surgery in
oh my God.
2022,
Oh,
and nobody could be in there with me. They were able to
I
visit
know.
for like an hour a day, and that was it.
That's a time, it's so bad. I mean, there's a show on now, it's called The Pit. It's with Noah Wiley from
It's
ER.
great. I'm
It's
watching.
fabulous. It's fabulous. I know.
Yeah.
It's so good. And his whole thing revolves around something that happened to him.
Right.
And, even when I think about it, sometimes I think about, oh my God, you look at the street, nobody was driving, nothing, blank. I didn't see my best friend that I used to see all the time. We didn't see her for a year. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, oh my God, how did we manage? And we did. However, there are the people that aren't managing. So be aware of somebody that doesn't want to go out anymore, just wants to stay home, because that happened to a lot of people.
Yeah, it did. You're absolutely right.
So
Yeah.
I mean, we have, I think compassion is basically a good word to use when you just to say about this whole show. If you have compassion for somebody else, this is so important. And if you don't, try. Really
Yeah.
try, because sometimes you can work things out in a marriage and friendships if you have some kind of compassion for the other
Mhm.
person.
Mhm. I
You
agree.
know, it's like smell the roses. I always use that. I go, like, just take a minute. Here
Yeah.
we are. We could have been all dead, and
Yeah.
we're not. So I
Right.
think anything bad that happens, you have to find something good that you can hold on to.
Yes. Yes. And always look at, like, I know I say to people, some people will be like, "Well, what is the lesson?" Or everything happens for a reason. And I'm like, No, I don't think
Yeah,
that people
yeah,
are
right,
abused for any kind of reason. I just think it's
right,
the
no,
human behavior that is
right,
criminal.
yes, sir.
Um, yeah. And we have to treat it as such. So I think I get a lot of tech bro guys, for example, like on Twitter, who will be like, "Oh, just get over it. Stop talking about this." And it's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
one, because I talk about it doesn't mean I'm not quote unquote over it. Or I get like, don't be a victim. And it's like, well, I was a victim of
yeah,
actual crimes that
yeah.
the guy ended up serving time for. You know, so I think we
And
really have to treat survivors
yeah,
with respect. Unfortunately, people want proof. It didn't happen unless there's physical proof. And even in that case, many times it's not enough to get any
yeah,
kind of a conviction. So
yeah,
it's the justice system is kind of a misnomer, I think, sometimes when it comes to survivors.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the schools, some of them, they have, psychologists, but listen, let's just face it, one is not enough for all the kids in a school.
Right. If they even have one.
If they even have one, is
Yeah.
right. And so
Yeah.
I think, those are the things in life that if you see somebody is not well or feeling bad, try to like talk to them or see if there's anything you can do for them, or maybe
Mhm.
guide them toward getting some help.
Yeah, it's super important. We call it resourcing. So a lot of
Yeah.
times Someone will say, well, what do you think of this or what do you think of that? I'm not the expert on trauma because I'm a survivor and I've done some trauma coaching. That doesn't make me an expert. I would never say, oh, you need to do this, or
Right,
I
right. Just
suggest here's a resource,
suggest. Right.
read more, and then get some professional help.
And where can people find your books? I mean, look, this is the other thing. When you go to a library and you see a book that's written 2020 or whatever, just look at the book. Don't look at the date, because libraries have a bad, this is one thing bad, they put everything new up in front. But
Right.
books that are 5 years old are still very informative.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can find my books pretty much anywhere books are sold, but
Okay.
definitely on Amazon.
Right.
Just look up Rachel Thompson. That's where I am.
I'll put a link out when I,
Thank
when I
you.
fix, yeah, the show. And,
Yeah.
listen, I'm not going to not say, you and I met from Bennett Pomerantz, must
Yeah.
say. And Bennett, listen, we used to argue all the time. You say, oh, you're my sister because we're arguing. But he brought all of us together.
He did. He
And so
did.
I think a person like him, and he had a lot of medical issues and issues, but
Yeah.
he was always there for people when they needed them.
Yes, he was.
He was. And he brought, I met you, and we all met a lot of each other from
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. So I think, that's what the world needs more of, is people caring about other people, to introduce them. And we have more alike than we do not alike. I mean, we are alike in a lot of ways. And I
Yeah.
love this job because I have met people that I never would have met.
That's wonderful. I feel the
And
same way about
yeah,
helping authors
yes,
with their
yes.
campaigns. I've read so many fascinating stories. And it seems like the majority of my clients are nonfiction, so I've been able to work with a lot of memoir writers.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just think people's lives, like you said, just talking to people, they're so interesting.
I find that interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
me too. Me too.
But I
So
guess I was always like that because my mother would say, years ago, she'd say, "Oh, just where is she off to now? Talking to somebody." But I guess we don't change that much,
no,
because
no.
I do, my husband, he'll laugh sometimes because I'll say, "Well, did you ask this?" He goes, "No, no." I go,
Yeah.
"Well, what do you mean you didn't ask this?"
Yeah.
Because I really like to find out about people, not to be nosy. I just want to know
Sure.
them better. I like to know them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's
Which is,
really good to know
right.
them.
And
Yeah.
that's how we all got to know each other. And like next week, I'm having Amy, Patricia Mead, and she's great. And Lindsay, Kristen Lindsay Hager, they'll be on. But like Amy, I met her. She was doing something from Ukraine, a book, um, where people would buy your book and then you
Yeah,
do a donation. And so you never know who you could meet. And we became good friends. I mean, that's what this world needs, is people that you meet from other avenues.
exactly.
And then you
Exactly.
become friends, and you could be very good friends with someone. So
Mhm.
Facebook and all those things are good in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a
Yes.
really great way to connect with
Yes.
potential readers. That's what I'm always looking at, is just, for like final words, are social media is not going to sell your books for you.
Right.
It is going to open a door to a potential sale. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. So if
Can you just give a couple, like one, like, is a blog good for people? So when they're listening, what do you feel is that's the necessity? Mailing list, blog? Because we go through this all the time,
yeah,
wondering
yeah,
what's great.
yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I write about this on my Substack too, so I'll make sure that you have that. And
Oh, good. Okay,
yeah, it's free to subscribe. I've got about 5,000 subscribers, and
that's
I publish.
great.
Thank you,
Wow,
thank you.
that's good.
I publish weekly,
Oh, that's
pretty
great.
much, and I also have a sponsor who covers my advertising costs.
Oh,
So
that's
yeah,
fabulous.
yeah. So I would say, for anybody who is debating on whether they want to have a website or not, I always say that you want to have a website because you need a home. You need to
Right.
put all your stuff there, right?
It's a
And
landing page. Right. It's a landing
exactly.
to let
Even if
some.
it is just a one pager, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And that is how you will start growing your, what we call, link juice, or AKA visibility, on Google and other
Yeah.
search engines as well.
Yeah.
So, if you're on Facebook and you post and somebody puts in, books about the Holocaust, then we would hope that your book Marsha, for
Yep.
example, would
Yep.
come up because
Yep.
we would have used those keywords in our description of the post.
Okay.
So
I'm going to put your links out there for people,
great. I'm pretty
and
much, if
find
they
you.
want to follow me for writing stuff, I'm Bad Redhead Media everywhere. So
Right.
Twitter, Facebook,
Right.
Instagram, Pinterest, my website, my Substack, just
Yeah.
everything. That is where you will find me.
That's who you are.
Yep, that's
All right. Thank you so much. It's been great
oh,
having you. Thank you. Come on again. It's not
you.
so long. Okay. All
I
right.
will.
Talk to you soon. All right.
Okay,
Take care. All right, bye, everybody.
thanks. Bye
Bye bye.
bye.